Imagine you are sitting in a capsule that has just separated from Earth. You watch the planet shrink through the window, and you know something that almost no one dares to say out loud. You will probably never set foot on that world again. The journey to Mars is not just a long expedition. It is a physical and biological break from the only place your body was designed for. Unlike the Moon, which is about 3 days away, Mars is so far that even under the best conditions, a trip using conventional rockets takes 6 to 9 months just to get there. And the problem doesn't end there. The window for returning does not open whenever you want, but only when the orbits of Earth and Mars align again, approximately every 26 months. That means that if everything goes well, you could spend between 2 and 3 years away from the gravity, air, and environment for which the human body evolved. During the journey, the crew will live in microgravity, a situation in which the body stops feeling weight. Internal organs are redistributed, fluids shift toward the upper body, muscles stop working as they do on Earth, and bones stop bearing load. On the International Space Station, it has already been observed that even with intense and controlled exercise programs, astronauts suffer significant loss of bone and muscle mass on missions of just 6 months. On a mission to Mars, that period of weightlessness will be longer, and it will also be repeated, first on the outbound trip, then on the return trip, with an intermediate stage on a planet whose gravity is only 38% of Earth's. This triple gravitational environment is one of the keys to the problem. Your body would leave Earth's full gravity, spend many months weightless, adapt to Mars's reduced gravity, and finally have to attempt to return to full gravity again. Each transition forces the body to reconfigure. It changes how the heart pumps blood, how bones remodel, how muscles contract, and how the inner ear senses balance. The body is plastic, it adapts. But that very capacity to adapt means that after years away, you are no longer the same organism that left. Physiologically, you would have become a human designed for a different world. Furthermore, on a mission like this, the concept of emergency evacuation does not exist. In low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station operates, a spacecraft can undock and return within hours if something goes very wrong. On the way to Mars, the distance becomes brutal. A radio signal can take more than 20 minutes to travel from one planet to another. Any critical decision is delayed. If a crew member suffers a serious cardiovascular problem, an infection, internal bleeding, or an accident, there is no hospital to return to. The only hospital available is the one you bring with you. The only habitable planet in the entire known solar system for you, Earth, will be hundreds of millions of kilometers away. Lifestyle also changes radically. On a journey like this, the crew would live in a confined environment, with few large surfaces, without the possibility of walking kilometers, running, climbing stairs, or receiving natural stimuli. There is no wind on your face, no smell of wet earth, no temperature changes marking the passage of day and night. Everything becomes a controlled cycle of tasks, forced exercise, system maintenance, and brief moments of leisure. The mind adapts to this routine, but at the cost of moving further and further away from the lifestyle it was shaped for on Earth. When the spacecraft finally reaches Mars, adaptation will continue. Martian gravity, being weaker, will make everything feel lighter. Walking will be easier for legs weakened by weightlessness, but that same comfort is deceptive. Your bones and muscles will still not receive the level of stimulus needed to remain strong at Earth levels. In exchange, your brain will begin to consider this reduced gravity as normal. Your cardiovascular system will readjust the pressure at which it pumps blood, your reflexes will recalibrate to the new falling force of objects, and your daily movements will adapt to an environment where everything weighs less. Over the months, the Martian colonist will become something intermediate between the Earth human and a new variant adapted to another planet. We are not talking about spectacular mutations or science fiction, but gradual yet profound changes in how tissues respond to the environment. The problem arises when considering the return journey. It is not just a matter of retracing the outbound trip in reverse. It is forcing a body adapted to low gravity and marked by years of space exposure to return to a planet where everything is heavier, where the circulatory system must work at full capacity, and where the skeleton must once again bear 100% of body weight, radiation. The invisible enemy that reshapes the body in low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station operates, astronauts already receive radiation doses much higher than on the surface. On a typical 6-month mission, exposure ranges from tens to hundreds of millisieverts, which is already enough to measurably increase the risk of cancer over a lifetime. But a mission to Mars plays in a completely different league. Current models and measurements taken by probes and rovers indicate that a round-trip journey of about 3 years, including time spent on the Martian surface, could expose each crew member to between 870 and 1,200 millisieverts of equivalent radiation. This is several times more than what is considered acceptable for the entire career of many radiation-exposed workers on Earth. To give an intuitive sense, on the Earth's surface, we receive on average about 2 to 3 millisieverts per year of natural background radiation. A single trip to Mars could equal hundreds of years of that exposure compressed into a couple of mission years. Some estimates compare it to thousands of X-rays or hundreds of CT scans taken in a very short period. It is not as high a dose as a nuclear accident, but it is enough to increase lifetime cancer risk by 5 to 10%. And to trigger degenerative processes in blood vessels and the cardiovascular system that resemble accelerated aging. The problem is not only how much, but also what type of radiation. On Earth, we are used to relatively low-energy X-rays and gamma rays in medical or industrial contexts. In deep space, in addition to these components, there are very high-energy charged particles coming from the Sun, and especially from outside the solar system, galactic cosmic rays. These are heavy atomic nuclei such as iron or nickel, traveling nearly at the speed of light. When they pass through the body, they do not simply sprinkle cells randomly. They leave a dense trail of ionizations that can destroy DNA, strands, proteins, and cell membranes along their path. Each of these atomic impacts is microscopic, but exposure is continuous, 24 hours a day for months and years. The result is that slowly, genetic mutations, damage to hereditary material, and structural changes in tissues accumulate. Statistically, this translates into a clear increase in solid tumors, leukemias, and other forms of cancer. The cardiovascular system is not spared either. Radiation accelerates inflammatory processes in the walls of arteries and veins, promotes the formation of plaques and calcifications, and increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes decades later. The brain is another major organ affected. Studies in animals and human models suggest that prolonged exposure to heavy cosmic rays can damage neurons and synaptic connections, particularly in regions involved in memory, attention, and decision-making. Translated to life on board, this means that over time, concentration problems, mental slowing, judgment errors, or mood alterations could appear. Some of these changes might be reversible, but others may not. It is not just about surviving the journey, but about keeping a mind clear enough to operate complex systems, respond to emergencies, and make critical decisions millions of kilometers from home. Radiation also damages the eyes and blood. One of the best documented consequences in astronauts is the accelerated development of cataracts. The lens, the eye's natural lens, becomes opaque after years of exposure. The bone marrow, responsible for producing red and white blood cells and platelets, is particularly sensitive. Prolonged irradiation can reduce its ability to produce blood cells, weakening the immune system and making it harder for the body to respond to infections or injuries. On a mission where there are no hospitals or blood banks available, any reduction in immune or clotting reserves becomes a serious threat. Faced with this scenario, the seemingly obvious solution would be to shield the spacecraft with very thick walls. But physics does not help. To stop highly energetic particles, large amounts of material are needed, which would enormously increase the spacecraft's weight and, consequently, the fuel required for launch. Furthermore, certain heavy materials can make the situation worse. When cosmic particles pass through thick shielding layers, they can generate secondary radiation, smaller fragments that still damage tissues. Radiation protection engineering in a long-duration spacecraft is a delicate balance and remains an open problem today. Solutions being studied include using water tanks, fuel, or even growing soil as natural barriers, or designing internal shelters where the crew can concentrate during particularly intense solar storms. But even in the best-case scenario, with optimized shielding and trajectories chosen during periods of minimal solar activity, the total dose accumulated on a round-trip journey to Mars remains at the limit or above what is considered acceptable for an entire astronaut career. For this reason, some agencies already assume that those going to Mars could practically use up their entire radiation quota on a single mission. Bones and muscles. The body falls apart in zero gravity. Long-duration mission data show this in stark terms. Astronauts can lose between 1 and 2% of bone density per month in the bones that bear the most load, such as the hips, femurs, and lumbar spine. On Earth, an elderly person loses a similar amount, but over the course of a year. In 6 months in orbit, a crew member can lose up to 10% of the bone mass in the hip, and recovery upon return can take years if it fully recovers at all. Now imagine that on a round-trip mission to Mars lasting 2 or 3 years, you are compressing decades of skeletal aging into a single journey. The mechanism is simple and devastating. Bone is a living tissue that constantly remodels itself. Some cells break down old bone matrix while others build it anew. In microgravity, the balance tips toward destruction. The body interprets that these bones no longer need to be so strong because they aren't supporting weight, so it reduces investment in maintaining them. The result is a lighter, more porous, and more fragile skeleton, very similar to that of a person with advanced osteoporosis. In a low-gravity environment, this might not be as noticeable, but on a planet with full gravity like Earth, it translates into a real risk of fractures when walking, tripping, or even standing up suddenly. Bone loss does not affect the whole body equally. The bones of the legs, pelvis, and lower spine are the most affected because they are the ones that bear the body's weight on Earth when standing. In space, that load disappears, and with it, the mechanical signal that tells the bone, "Stay strong here." As a result, the calcium stored in the skeleton is released into the blood, increasing the risk of kidney stones and disturbing the body's mineral balance. On a long-duration mission, it's not just that your bones weaken. You are also forcing your kidneys and other organs to deal with an excess of circulating minerals for months. Meanwhile, muscles follow a similar path. The muscles of the legs, back, and torso, which on Earth work all day to keep you upright, suddenly become idle. Without the constant resistance of gravity, they stop contracting with the same strength, lose volume, and weaken. Studies show that even with intensive onboard exercise programs, muscle mass and strength decrease significantly during 6-month missions. In other words, even with mandatory gym every day, the body cannot maintain its previous level. On a mission to Mars, this situation persists during the outbound trip, changes during the stay on the planet, where gravity is only 38% of Earth's, and repeats again on the return journey. The musculature not only atrophies, it reprograms to function in an environment where everything weighs less. Your legs and back adapt to lifting bodies and objects that weigh only a fraction of what they would on Earth. Your reflexes, coordination, and maximum strength recalibrate to this new normal. From the body's perspective, after months in that environment, the correct planet is no longer Earth. It's Mars. Cartilage and joints are not spared either. Reduced load changes how pressure is distributed across the knees, hips, and spine. While in the short term, this may reduce mechanical wear, in the long term, the lack of stimulus also affects cartilage health and joint stability. Combined with muscle atrophy, the risk of sprains, falls, and micro-injuries increases when the astronaut moves under full gravity again. After a long mission, a simple stumble on Earth can have far more serious consequences than before departure. The spine undergoes an additional phenomenon. With the disappearance of gravitational compression, intervertebral discs expand slightly, and the person grows a few centimeters in space. Upon return, that structure compresses again, sometimes with intense pain and a higher risk of back problems. On a round-trip mission to Mars, this cycle of expansion and compression would repeat several times. When leaving Earth, adapting to Mars, leaving Mars, and re-entering Earth's atmosphere. Current countermeasures partially slow down deterioration, but do not eliminate it. Studies of dozens of astronauts show that even with very well-designed training programs, significant losses of bone and muscle mass still occur after missions of about 6 months. For a journey to Mars, exposure will be longer, and the body's reserves will be even more compromised. The idea of introducing artificial gravity through centrifuges or rotating habitats is under study, but it is still far from becoming an operational reality. The heart and circulation, a pump designed for another planet. During the first days in weightlessness, many astronauts experience what is known as moon face and congestion in the upper body. This redistribution of fluids deceives the internal pressure and volume sensors. The body thinks it has too much blood and responds by eliminating fluid through urine. Plasma volume, the liquid part of the blood, decreases. With less circulating volume, the heart beats under less load. This seems like a logical adaptation to the new environment, but it comes at a cost. The system gets used to operating in reduced mode, and each day spent in space reinforces this new normal. This adjustment also affects the heart muscle itself. In microgravity conditions, the heart no longer has to pump as forcefully against the column of blood that, on Earth, accumulates in the legs when standing. Mechanical work decreases, and as with any muscle that is used less, its structure can change. Some recent studies suggest that with very well-planned exercise programs, the size and overall function of the heart can remain relatively stable during missions of up to 6 months. But this does not mean the system remains equally capable of facing Earth's gravity after years of adaptation to a different environment. It only means that we have learned to avoid extreme atrophy in the short term. The real problem arises when the crew member must stand up again in a full gravitational field, after months or years with less blood volume, with blood vessels accustomed to a different distribution of pressures, and a heart that has been working lightly. The system no longer tolerates an upright posture well. The result is what is called orthostatic intolerance, dizziness, blurred vision, a feeling of faintness, and even syncope when attempting to walk, or simply when moving from lying down to standing. On current low Earth orbit missions, which last about 6 months, a significant percentage of astronauts cannot remain standing for more than a few minutes without assistance immediately after landing. On a mission to Mars, this situation becomes more complex. The heart and blood vessels would go through a complete cycle. Adaptation to microgravity during the outbound journey, new adaptation to Mars's reduced gravity, readjustment again to microgravity on the return journey, and finally an attempt to readapt to Earth gravity. Each phase requires a fine recalibration of blood pressure, arterial and venous tone, blood volume, and cardiac performance itself. The body can keep up to a certain extent, but not without leaving marks. With each environmental change, the likelihood of arrhythmias, blood pressure imbalances, episodes of loss of consciousness, and cumulative damage to heart function increases. Radiation, which has already accompanied the traveler like a shadow since leaving Earth's orbit, adds another layer of risk. Chronic exposure to high-energy particles not only increases the likelihood of cancer, it also alters the structure of blood vessels, promotes inflammation, and accelerates processes that, on Earth, we associate with cardiovascular aging. Arterial plaques, vascular stiffness, higher susceptibility to heart attacks and strokes become more likely threats for someone whose entire life has been spent in an environment hostile to the circulatory system. In other words, upon returning from Mars, your vascular system could be much older internally than your chronological age. The kidneys also participate in this game of forced balances. Bone mass loss releases calcium into the blood, which must be filtered and excreted. At the same time, the body attempts to adjust fluid volume to the new conditions of pressure and non-existent gravity. This dual effort increases the risk of kidney stones and alters overall blood pressure regulation. A kidney stone on Earth is painful but manageable with hospitals and technology. On a spacecraft millions of kilometers away, it could become a serious medical crisis with limited treatment options. The entire heart vessel kidney circuit operates in a permanent compromise mode, far from the conditions for which it evolved. To mitigate these effects, space agencies experiment with measures such as the use of lower body negative pressure devices, fluid loading before re-entry, and very demanding exercise routines during flight. These strategies help reduce blood pressure drops upon standing and maintain a minimum level of aerobic capacity, but they are not a complete solution. They work reasonably well for short-duration flights around Earth. Their real effectiveness for multi-year missions with intermediate stops on another planet remains unknown. No one has yet tested how the human cardiovascular system responds to a full round-trip cycle to Mars with a long stay. If we imagine a Martian colonist trying to return to Earth after 2 or 3 years, the physiological scenario is delicate. They would face a heart adapted to pumping blood under easier conditions, with less circulating volume, a weakened skeleton, and muscles incapable of supporting the body as effectively. The mere thought of walking through a terrestrial city, climbing stairs, or carrying weight could involve constant dizziness, risk of falls, and near-limit cardiac effort. Physical return could be possible with intensive technological assistance, prolonged rehabilitation, and a highly controlled medical environment, but resuming ordinary life on Earth would be, at best, extremely complicated. Brain, senses, and mind, when home is no longer Earth. In microgravity, fluid distribution changes. More blood and cerebrospinal fluid remain in the upper part of the body, including the head. This congestion affects the inside of the skull and, in particular, the eyes. With long-duration missions, a phenomenon began to be observed that now has its own name. A set of changes in vision, the optic nerve, and the shape of the eyeball associated with prolonged spaceflight. Some astronauts return with altered vision, require new prescriptions, and show structural changes in imaging exams that in some cases persist years after returning. For a future traveler to Mars, this is not a minor detail. The mission requires reading instruments, interpreting screens, distinguishing color nuances, identifying equipment failures, and driving vehicles on the Martian surface. Partial deterioration of near vision or changes in spatial perception may not be deadly on their own, but they increase the risk of mistakes in an environment where a single error can cost a life. And these changes are added to other physical modifications: more fragile bones, weaker muscles, a heart adapted to a different gravity. Moreover, the brain does not only receive more fluid and pressure, it is also exposed to radiation. High-energy particles passing through the skull can damage neurons and connections, especially in regions related to memory, attention, and decision-making. Experiments on animals and human simulations suggest that, over time, difficulties may arise in concentrating, processing complex information, and responding quickly to unexpected situations. In a laboratory on Earth, these changes would be concerning. On a spacecraft millions of kilometers away, they can make the difference between a safe operation and an accident. Added to this is a factor that cannot be measured with a scanner but weighs as much as any physiological data: the mind confronted with isolation and the certainty that there is no turning back. A mission to Mars means living for months confined in a small volume, with the same few people, without physical contact with anyone else, without changing landscapes, without spontaneous outings, without any real possibility of escaping the environment if something is distressing. Communication with Earth also has increasing delays. What you say takes minutes to arrive, and the response takes as long to return. Conversations are no longer fluid dialogues, but delayed messages. Studies of Earth-based simulations, with crews confined for more than a year in modules that imitate a Martian spacecraft, show repeated patterns: sleep disturbances, mood changes, interpersonal conflicts, episodes of apathy, sustained stress. When confinement, monotony, demanding work, and the feeling that every mistake can affect the entire mission are combined, the result is a complex psychological cocktail. And this is in environments where, if something gets out of control, you can open a door and go outside. On a real spacecraft heading to Mars, that safety valve does not exist. Personal identity also comes into play. A traveler to Mars is not a tourist. They know from the start that very likely they will never return to their city, country, or family in the traditional physical sense. This permanent renunciation requires a profound reconfiguration of the way one understands life. Over time, to protect itself, the mind may begin to let go of the idea of home as something tied to Earth and replace it with something else: the mission, the crew, the module, the Martian habitat. It is an adaptation mechanism, but it comes at a cost. Mentally returning to Earth, even if the body allowed it, would be emotionally as difficult as it would be physiologically. Mental health on such long missions is, in fact, one of the greatest challenges recognized by space agencies. It is known that prolonged isolation and lack of sensory variety can promote anxiety, depression, irritability, obsessive thoughts, and, in extreme cases, psychotic episodes. This is not about individual weakness, but the predictable reaction of a normal human brain subjected to abnormal conditions for too long. Current programs are already testing countermeasures: strict work and rest routines, remote psychological support, scheduled recreational activities, and conflict resolution training. But even with all that, the risk never disappears completely. It can only be managed. On Mars, psychological adaptation continues. The first months on the surface will be a mix of wonder and extreme workload, setting up habitats, energy systems, greenhouses, laboratories. Over time, the novelty fades, leaving the routine of living on a hostile planet under a different sky, with an unbreathable atmosphere just behind the module walls. Stepping outside requires a suit, planning, and risk. There are no improvised walks, no cities to get lost in, no anonymous crowds. For many, Earth will begin to become an abstract memory, almost a personal myth. When we talk about not being able to return, we usually think of insufficient rockets or lack of fuel. The reality is more complex. After 2 or 3 years, that traveler's body will have changed. Bones, muscles, heart, blood vessels, eyes, brain, and immune system will have reconfigured to survive in the peculiar mix of microgravity, low Martian gravity, radiation, and confinement. But the person inhabiting that body will also have changed. Their idea of home, their relationships, their tolerance for isolation, their relationship with risk, and their way of making decisions will have been shaped for an environment that does not exist on Earth.